Welcome to the new DC. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not one of those TikTokers. But today we are doing a very fun list with DC Event Crisis or something like that. I don't know what I'm going to name it exactly, but I'm really focusing on the events that were either titled Crisis in it or kind of like basically it is a crisis event without the name, aka Flashpoint and Convergence. Those were crisis events. They just didn't have the word crisis in it. And today I'm really going to focus on the main ones, not all the tie-ins and everything. I'm talking about the main story here. And we have all the way from Crisis on Infinite Earth, which started off in 1985, and then we have all the way till the newest one, which is Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths. And I'm excited to get into this list because I read them all and I have kind of controversial opinions. So let's do it. Kicking off the event list is Crisis on Infinite Earth. Now, if we're talking about like the impact something made, this has to be one of the biggest events of all time, if not the biggest. Not only did it have the biggest ramifications afterwards and created pretty much all the modern takes on superheroes that you love from DC, it was a big event for DC. I think it's like one of the best selling events of all time. And as someone who's read it much later, obviously I wasn't even born when this came out, I have mixed opinions. I think that what it did was interesting. I think the idea of it is great. I also think that what came from it is wonderful. I love that new take with Man of Steel with Superman and Wonder Woman's new take with George Perez and Batman definitely going to the darker route. All these things came from Infinite Earths. However, the writing is not my style. I've never been a huge Wolfman fan in terms of his writing style. I know some people love him from Teen Titans and such, and I definitely get that. And I definitely get that some people can look back and say, no, back then this was great writing. But for me, doesn't quite hold up. Now, I read this years and years ago and didn't love it, and I read it recently and respected it more. I enjoyed it. But to say if it's one of my favorite ideas or favorite moments, I think it's not. I think it's kind of the middle of the road. I think it has cool ideas. I think it's interesting. I think it's kind of in between two of these lists here. Is it a solid event? I think it is, and I think what it did for DC, it deserves to be there. If it was my personal opinion, I'd probably put it more in the middle of the road for me. I don't know if I'd reread this again anytime soon. But saying that, I'm going to put on the low solid event because of what it did for DC. On the flip side, Zero Hour is not good. I really don't like this event except for one or two cool ideas. Anything with Hal kind of being a focus back then is interesting to me because I am not a huge Hal fan. So seeing him kind of a despicable piece of shit really brings me joy. Now, I do think that it brought momentum to the DC universe because they didn't have such a big event for years after Infinite Earth. And so we needed something to kind of boost it, get it interesting again. And this did do that. It did bring that to the table. So that's good. But one or two decent moments in this isn't going to make me love this event. I think it's kind of just boring. I don't think it's well written or plotted, and it didn't really do much to the overall universe. There's smaller events that did much more than this. So to me, this is kind of one that if you don't read it, you're really not losing much. But if you do enjoy the DC history, you might want to go back and check this out. But I do think it's probably one of the weakest events that DC has ever done. So that is definitely going into one or two decent moments, but nothing more than that. All right, so Identity Crisis. This is probably the one that people are kind of iffy on. It definitely brought more of a realistic, more grounded take to the overall DC universe. It's dealing with a lot of emotion, a lot of grief, a lot of sadness, a lot of death, and I absolutely love this event. I love it. Now, I'm not always into the realism into my superhero comics. I like my superhero comics to be high fantasy and crazy things happening, worlds are colliding. All that's great. But every once in a while, I like grounded stuff, to sit back and just enjoy some simple detective who done it murder mystery. And that's what this is. But it also brings a human level. It gives characters who, to me, I didn't know really existed or cared about until I read this. They give that real human emotion to a lot of these characters. I will also say that I really enjoy that Green Arrow kind of takes center stage here. I mean, there's other characters that they focus on, like Batman, Robin, and all these other characters. But Green Arrow, to me, is kind of the central focus point. And I love that. I love it because I'm a huge Green Arrow fan. So for him to come back in this and be that focus and be that kind of hero to unite the old Justice League after all the hidden secrets and everything is great. I think the twists are cool. Again, it is not the most perfect book written, and I know there's some people that hate the grim of it, but for me, I absolutely love this. I think it kickstarted DC into a new direction that to me was really entertaining. From this all the way to about 2008, that was like my prime DC reading that I loved. So saying that, I think it's an amazing event. I think it's one of DC's best events of all time, and I think it's one of the strongest Crisis events. So I'm putting it in amazing. And so the follow up to it from Identity Crisis was Infinite Crisis, but Infinite Crisis was also a proper sequel to Crisis on Infinite Earth, and that's what makes it so special. See, Identity Crisis was small scale murder mystery. Infinite Crisis, they wanted to harken back to that crazy big event that we had on Crisis Infinite Earth. And for this event, I think the biggest difference between Crisis on Infinite Earth, Crisis on Infinite Earth definitely felt like a reset button to kind of start the new universe. This didn't feel like this. This felt like a shakeup, and a lot of new series came from this, but it also continued a lot of the other series in new directions. So I think this was kind of the big event that did shake things up, but it was also a proper event. It also had a complete story. It was also interesting. It also had a great build up. Everything about this event for me really worked. I think the epicness of it works. I think it works better if you read all the tie-ins, but even as someone who first read it without any tie-ins, I was really into it. The only thing that I felt was a little crazy is there's so many things happening that I was like, who are these people? So I feel with this event, you definitely have to have a little bit of more DC history in your knowledge, in your brain, in your chronom, whatever the fuck. All right, so with that, this is also an amazing event. This is one of my favorite as well, but I do put it slightly behind Identity Crisis, but definitely an amazing event, one of my favorite from DC. All right, so Final Crisis. I fucking hate this event. I don't know why people like this event, and maybe one day I will unlock the mystery. Grant Morrison has always been a kind of a 50-50 guy to me anyway. Sometimes I love his stuff, sometimes I hate it. This goes in the very strong hated. I read this twice and hated it both times, but that was years ago. So I figured maybe one day I'll grab the omnibus, read all the tie-ins, and maybe understand why this event is liked so much. But this to me is one of the poorest events that I've ever read. It's very confusing. And yeah, I absolutely fucking hate this event. This to me is a garbage event. Poop. So Flashpoint is probably one of the biggest events of all time for what it did. Bring in the new 52. And depending on who you ask, that's either the worst thing ever and they left DC and never went back, or it's what got people into comics because a lot of people jumped on at the new 52. I think it is an interesting event. I think it is kind of a cool event to give focus on the Flash, but I do think that it kind of isn't that great on rereads. Now, I've read this about 3 times. I've seen the movie. There's another movie coming out, The Flash, which is basically Flashpoint in a lot of ways, and it's interesting. But I do like the what if feel of, Bruce Wayne dead and Thomas Wayne being Batman, more of a vicious Batman. This world is more fucking depressing and disgusting. But Flash is still that beacon of hope that he wants everybody to kind of unite or go back in time again to, fix it. But, Barry just keeps fucking up the timeline. That's kind of who he is. So, yeah, Flashpoint, I think it's good. I don't even know, though, if I put it in solid event because the more I read it, the more I'm like, this definitely felt like editorial. Like, you have to put something together now in 2 months and it's going to reset everything. We're going New 52. And everybody's like, oh, shit. So it feels a little rushed. I think Flashpoint Beyond helped flush out that universe. But again, I'm not 100% invested in this universe to begin with. So Flashpoint is basically the ultimate what if. It has really good ideas and it's a decent event, but it's not great. So Final Crisis I absolutely hate, but there's one event that's worse than that in the Crisis universe, and that's fucking Convergence. I hate this event. This event is fucking awful. This is one of the worst written Big Two comics I've ever read. It's beyond confusing, but when you do get the idea of what's happening, it's just so paper thin the way the characters are written. I just don't understand why this has any fans, or if it even does. I never actually heard anyone be like, yeah, I liked Convergence. Maybe like a tie-in, but not the main event. And this I bought for like $5 at Ollie's, and I wish I never bought it. That's how much I think this event sucks balls. So this is one of the only events that I actually put behind Final Crisis. It's a piece of poo-poo, but at least it bought in, Rebirth, so that's cool. So Heroes in Crisis. Now, if you don't know really the background of this, I think it helps a little bit more. So originally Tom King wanted to write a book about heroes dealing with PTSD because he himself probably deals with that being a veteran now. And I think it's an interesting idea. I mean, these heroes do a lot of things, they go through a lot of shit. And like Identity Crisis, I like the more grounded feel. However, Dito, good old Dito, was like, no, we want an event similar to Identity Crisis because that was a big seller and it made headlines. So Tom King, being one of the biggest writers at the time, said, all right. And I think it got derailed. So there's two stories here. The PTSD storyline, heroes dealing with the fallout of their actions and fighting villains all the time and saving people. That part of the story I really enjoy. The murder mystery with Wally, not bad, but not great. I think Tom King was going for any hero, no matter how good they are, or any human, no matter how good their intentions are, can have a breaking point. And I think that's what's interesting with Wally. Now, they kind of retconned it after this that it was, some bullshit in the head. It was garbage. But anyway, I like my heroes flawed, extremely flawed. And Wally was extremely flawed in the storyline. Didn't work for everyone. Myself, I thought the actual twist and like the actual turn and how it happened was a little eh. But for me, one great thing about this event is I did like the PTSD moments, or at least the interview moments where people are dealing with their emotions. I think that's interesting. And I also really, really enjoyed the art. Beautiful art. Clayman is just one of the best. I believe that's the artist here. So where do I put this? I'd probably put it where Flashpoint is, where I think it's good ideas, but not great. I don't think it's quite as high as in a solid event because I don't think the ending stuck the landing like it did in Identity Crisis for me. But I don't think it's horrible. People say it's like one of the worst things ever written. I don't think so, at least in my personal opinion. As far as like more of a grounded crisis, like Identity Crisis, it's good, but it's not great. So I'm going to put it right above Flashpoint because I think the art is better than Flashpoint. And probably one of the most controversial picks, besides the ones I just had, is going to be Dark Crisis on Infinite Earth. This came out last year. I was not really anticipating it. Joshua Williams is kind of a weird writer for me. Like, I like some of the stuff, some stuff I like, But lately, I've been enjoying this stuff, and I gotta say, I love this event. I think this is a really cool, like, passing of the torch event. This has a lot of focus on John, a lot of focus on Nightwing. Unfortunately, a little bit too much focus on Black Adam, who's not a hero that I like, or villain, or whatever the fuck anti-hero you want to call him. But there were a lot of moments in this that I really enjoyed, mostly revolving around John being a hero, trying to help the world in the way he would view how his father would. And I thought that was a great passing in the torch. I thought Nightwing as a leader in this, like having to step up, was excellent, really well done. And while I thought the beginning was a little wobbly, by issue 2 I was in, and by the end I was really just digging this. Now there's some low, as any event, but I really thought this was a solid event. I had a lot of fun reading this, and if you're a fan of like the newer generation of heroes, or even the ones that feel like the sons, or characters like this, the actual family members getting passed down to stand up and fight back, I think things like John and Dick Grayson doing that is really entertaining. So with that, I'm going to put this in a solid event. As far as enjoyment, I think I enjoyed it more than Crisis on Infinite Earth, but Crisis on Infinite Earth probably had much better impact. So yeah, this is my list. Now, some people are like, oh, well, why'd you put Conversions and Flashpoint, blah, blah. I think those kind of just fit the overall tone of a Crisis event, so that's why I put them in there. But if you want to take them out, that's fine. It's still, this is pretty much my list of these events. So events aren't the worst thing in the world for me. I usually am pretty open to reading them. Sometimes they surprise me, like Dark Crisis, and sometimes they fucking flop, like Lazarus Planet. That was awful. But yeah, what do you guys think? These are cool events. These are some of the most famous ones. If you've read them all, rank them below. If you read a few, tell me which ones you like, which ones you didn't. And if you didn't read any, I would suggest to check out at least Identity Crisis, because I feel like that's the one you probably can read of all of these without reading anything prior. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed. Please like this if you liked my video. Please subscribe if you loved it, because I got more content like this coming out. And everybody else, have a good day. That was a little kissy woo. I don't know why I did that.